The morning Philip Jensen decided to take the mountain trail instead of the main road. He had no idea his entire life was about to change in a way that would make every choice before this moment seem insignificant. He adjusted the pack on his shoulders, feeling the weight of 3 days' worth of supplies, and started up the narrow path that wound through the dense pine forest. Away from the relative safety of the frontier town he had called home for the past 2 years. Philip was a surveyor by trade, 24 years old, with sun-darkened skin, and the lean build of someone who spent most of his time outdoors. His brown hair hung just past his collar, usually tied back with a leather cord, and his gray eyes had learned to read landscapes the way scholars read books. The Merchant Guild in Thornhaven had hired him to map the Northern Territory, land that supposedly belonged to the Crown, but remained largely unexplored due to the orc tribes that claimed it as their hunting grounds. The trail climbed steadily, and Philip found his rhythm, his boots making soft sounds on the packed earth. Spring had arrived early this year, and the forest hummed with life. Birds called from the canopy above, and somewhere in the distance, he could hear the rush of snowmelt tumbling down from higher elevations. It was beautiful country, wild and untamed, exactly the kind of place that made him feel most alive. He had been walking for perhaps 3 hours when he felt that peculiar sensation of being watched. Philip had spent enough time in the wilderness to trust his instincts. He slowed his pace but did not stop, letting his hand drift casually toward the knife at his belt. His eyes scanned the forest on either side of the trail, looking for movement, for any sign of what might be tracking him. The attack, when it came, was not what he expected. One moment he was walking, alert but calm, and the next he was being driven backward with tremendous force. His back slammed against the rough bark of an ancient pine, driving the air from his lungs. Strong hands pinned his shoulders, and before he could react, before he could even process what was happening, something warm pressed close to his neck, sniffing. Someone was sniffing him. Philip froze, his heart hammering in his chest, every muscle tense with the primal urge to fight or flee. But the grip on his shoulders was iron strong, and he knew instinctively that struggling would be pointless. Slowly, carefully, he turned his head just enough to see his attacker, green skin. Tusks, pointed ears, an orc, but not just any orc. A young woman, perhaps close to his own age, with features that caught him completely off guard. She was beautiful in a way that defied everything he had been taught about her people. Her skin was the deep green of summer leaves, smooth and flawless. Small ivory tusks curved up from her lower jaw, elegant rather than frightening. Her hair was black as midnight, worn in a thick braid that fell over one shoulder, and her eyes gods. Her eyes were the most startling shade of amber he had ever seen, bright and intelligent, and currently filled with something that looked like triumph. She pressed her face against the side of his neck again, inhaling deeply, and then pulled back just enough to meet his gaze. Her lips curved into a smile that was both fierce and somehow satisfied. "I knew it," she said, her voice low and rich with emotion he could not quite name. Philip found his voice, though it came out rougher than he intended. "Knew what?" She did not answer immediately. Instead, she studied his face with an intensity that made him feel exposed, vulnerable in a way that had nothing to do with the fact that she could probably break his neck without much effort. Her hands were still on his shoulders, and he became suddenly, acutely aware of how warm she was, how close she stood, how her breath ghosted across his skin. "You don't smell like the others," she said finally. "The humans from the town. They smell of fear and hatred and iron. But you—" She leaned in again, not quite touching him this time, but close enough that he could feel the heat radiating from her body. You smell like pine and river water and curiosity. No fear. Well, she amended, a hint of amusement entering her expression. Perhaps a little fear now, but not of me. Not really. I'm not sure that's entirely accurate, Philip managed, trying to regain some sense of control over the situation. You did just slam me into a tree. I wanted your attention. You have it. She laughed then, a sound that was surprisingly melodious, and some of the tension went out of her shoulders. She did not, however, release him. My name is Grasha, Grasha of the Ironwood clan, or I was, until 3 days ago. Something in the way she said it made Philip's chest tighten with unexpected sympathy. Was, her smile faded, replaced by something harder, more guarded. That's a long story, human. What is your name? Philip Jensen. Philip, she repeated, as if testing the sound of it. Are you from Thornhaven? He nodded slowly, still trying to make sense of what was happening. Orc raiding parties occasionally attacked outlying farms, and there had been 3 pitched battles between the town militia and orc war bands in the past decade. The two peoples existed in a state of perpetual tension, separated by mutual distrust and old grievances. Yet here was this orc woman, Grasha, treating him not as an enemy but as something else entirely. I'm a surveyor, he said, because it seemed important to be honest with her. I was hired to map the Northern Territory. Grasha's expression shifted, becoming thoughtful. That land is sacred to my people, or it was. I suppose it doesn't matter anymore. She finally released his shoulders and took a step back, giving him space to breathe. You should not be here, Philip Jensen. These trails are not safe for humans traveling alone. I noticed, he said dryly, rubbing his shoulders where she had gripped him. He would have bruises tomorrow, he was certain of it. She had the grace to look slightly apologetic. I could have been more gentle, but I needed to know for certain. Know what? He asked the question again, more firmly this time. Grasha crossed her arms over her chest, a defensive gesture that made her seem suddenly vulnerable despite her obvious strength. She wore simple clothing, a tunic and breeches made of supple leather, practical for moving through the forest, and carried no visible weapons, though Philip suspected she did not need any. Her muscled arms and broad shoulders spoke of a lifetime of physical training. I needed to know if the old stories were true, she said quietly. The ones my grandmother used to tell before she died, about soul bonds, about how you could recognize your mate by scent alone even across species lines. Philip felt his breath catch. Your mate. The one the ancestors chose for you, Grasha explained. Her amber eyes locked on his face as if trying to gauge his reaction. It's rare, even among our own kind. My grandmother said it was rarer still between humans and orcs, so rare that most clans forgot it was even possible. But she remembered. She said when you found that person, you would know them instantly. Their scent would call to something deep inside you, something that existed before words, before reason. The world seemed to have narrowed to just the two of them standing in the dappled sunlight beneath the pines. Philip knew he should be afraid, should be planning his escape, should be doing anything other than standing here listening to an orc woman tell him they were destined to be together. And yet he found himself captivated, drawn in by the raw honesty in her voice. And you think I'm your. He could not quite bring himself to say the word. I know you are. Grasha's voice was steady, certain. I caught your scent on the wind 2 miles back. At first I thought I was imagining it, but I followed the trail, and the closer I got, the stronger the pull became. By the time I saw you walking along this path, I felt like I was burning from the inside out. I had to know. I had to be certain. Philip ran a hand through his hair, trying to organize his thoughts. This was insane. This was impossible. And yet some small part of him, some instinct he did not fully understand, was responding to her words. He had felt it too, that sense of rightness when she touched him, that strange electricity that still hummed in the air between them. "I don't understand," he said finally, helplessly. "Neither do I. Not fully." Grasha looked away, staring into the forest. 3 days ago, I was preparing for my trial of adulthood. I was to lead a hunting party into the deep woods and return with enough meat to feed the clan for a week. It was supposed to be my moment of glory, the moment I proved myself worthy of the Ironwood name. What happened? My father happened. Her jaw clenched, and Philip saw pain flash across her features. The chieftain decided that my trial would include something else, a test of loyalty. He wanted me to lead a raid on one of your outlying farms, to kill humans, to prove that I was a true warrior, not soft like my grandmother. Philip felt cold despite the warm spring air. "Did you?" Grasha's head snapped around and her amber eyes blazed with fierce pride. "No, I refused. I told my father that slaughtering farmers in their beds was not honor, it was murder. I told him that if we continued down this path, there would be nothing left of us but blood and ash. I'm guessing he didn't take that well. He cast me out, declared me clanless, nameless, without honor. My mother wept but did not speak in my defense. My brothers turned their backs on me. Within an hour, I had gathered what little I could carry and left the only home I had ever known." She paused, her voice dropping to barely more than a whisper. "I have been walking for 3 days, Philip. I had no destination, no plan. I was simply walking, until I caught your scent." The anguish in her voice cut through Philip's confusion and caution. He knew what it was to be alone, to be cast adrift from everything familiar. He had left his own home at 17 after his parents died in a plague outbreak, had traveled from town to town working whatever jobs he could find until he discovered his talent for surveying and map-making. "I'm sorry," he said, and meant it. "That's an impossible choice to have to make." "Was it?" Grasha turned back to him, and there was a desperate kind of hope in her eyes. "I have been questioning myself with every step, wondering if I was weak, wondering if I should have simply done what was expected of me. But then I found you and I knew. I knew that refusing my father was the right choice, because if I had led that raid, if I had killed those people, I would have destroyed any chance of this, whatever this is." Philip took a slow breath, trying to steady himself. "Grasha, I don't know you, you don't know me. An hour ago, I didn't know you existed. You can't expect me to just accept that we're meant to be together based on smell. I don't expect anything." She said it simply, matter-of-factly. "But I'm asking you to consider the possibility. I'm asking you not to run from this, at least not yet. Give me a chance to prove that what I'm feeling is real." "And how exactly do you plan to do that?" Grasha gestured at his pack. "You're traveling north. So am I, apparently. Let me come with you. I know these lands better than any human surveyor. I can guide you through territories you would never be able to map on your own, and in return you can help me figure out what comes next, where I go from here." It was a reasonable proposal, Philip had to admit. And yet agreeing to it meant stepping into territory far more dangerous than any unmapped wilderness. It meant spending time with her, getting to know her, potentially developing feelings that would be impossible to act on. Humans and orcs did not form relationships. It simply was not done. The social consequences alone would be catastrophic. But as he stood there looking at Grasha, at the vulnerability beneath her warrior's bearing, at the hope she was trying so hard to hide, Philip found himself nodding. "All right," he said. "You can come with me. But we need to establish some ground rules." Relief washed over her features, so profound that Philip felt his heart clench. "Name them." "First, no more slamming me into trees. If you want my attention, just call my name." A hint of a smile tugged at her lips. "Agreed." "Second, We're traveling companions. Partners, if you want to think of it that way, but nothing more. Not until we both understand what's happening here. Grasha nodded, though he saw something flicker in her eyes, disappointment perhaps, or resignation. I can accept that, for now. And third, if we encounter any other humans, you let me do the talking. The people in these territories are scared of orcs, and with good reason given the history. I don't want either of us getting hurt because of a misunderstanding. That's fair. She straightened her shoulders, and just like that, the vulnerable woman disappeared, replaced by the warrior. I will follow your lead in human settlements, but in the wild you follow mine. My tracking skills are better, my sense of direction is better, and I know which plants are safe to eat and which will make you vomit for 3 days straight. Philip could not help but smile at that. Deal. They shook on it, and the moment their hands clasped, Philip felt that strange electricity again, stronger this time. Grasha's eyes widened slightly, and he knew she felt it too. For a long moment, neither of them moved, and then Grasha gently pulled her hand back. We should keep moving, she said, her voice slightly unsteady. There's a good campsite about 2 hours north of here. We can reach it before dark if we maintain a steady pace. Philip nodded and adjusted his pack. Lead the way. They fell into step together, Grasha setting a pace that was brisk but manageable. Philip found himself studying her as they walked, noting the fluid way she moved through the forest, how she seemed to instinctively avoid loose rocks and hidden roots. She belonged here in a way he never quite had, despite all his time in the wilderness. "Can I ask you something?" he said after they had been walking for perhaps 20 minutes. "You can ask. I may not answer." "Fair enough." "What did you mean when you said I don't smell like fear and hatred and iron?" Grasha glanced back at him, considering. "Exactly what I said. Most humans who come into orc territory are soldiers or hunters or settlers who see us as obstacles to be removed. They smell of aggression and metal and the kind of fear that makes people dangerous. But you don't. You smell like you belong in the forest, like you're part of it rather than trying to conquer it. I've always felt more comfortable outdoors than in towns," Philip admitted. "Cities make me feel trapped." "Same." Grasha ducked under a low-hanging branch, her braids swinging with the movement. "I used to drive my family crazy, disappearing for days at a time to explore the deep woods. My grandmother was the only one who understood. She would tell me stories about the old days before the wars when orcs and humans sometimes lived side by side in peace. I didn't know that was ever true. Most humans don't. Most orcs have forgotten too, but it was real once. There were even mixed settlements, places where children grew up speaking both languages, learning both traditions." Grasha's voice carried a note of wistfulness. "My grandmother said it ended when fear became stronger than curiosity. When people on both sides decided it was easier to hate than to understand." Philip thought about that as they continued north. He had grown up hearing stories about orc savagery, about raids and massacres, and the constant threat they posed to frontier settlements. But he had also heard whispers of other stories, accounts from old-timers who remembered trading with orc hunters, of winter storms where orc and human families had sheltered together, of brief moments of cooperation in the face of greater threats. "You think it could be that way again?" he asked. Grasha was quiet for so long that Philip thought she might not answer. Then she said, "I don't know, but I think maybe it has to start with individuals. 2 people choosing to see each other as something other than enemies. 2 people taking a chance. Like we're doing." "Like we're doing," she agreed. The campsite Grasha had mentioned turned out to be a small clearing beside a stream, sheltered by a rocky overhang that would provide protection from rain. Philip had to admit it was an ideal spot, access to fresh water, defensible position, and enough deadfall wood to build a fire without having to range too far from camp. They worked together in companionable silence to set up for the night. Philip erected his small tent while Grasha gathered firewood and arranged stones into a fire ring. By the time the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, they had a cheerful fire crackling and water heating for tea. Philip pulled out his supplies: dried meat, hardtack, a few precious apples from the market in Thornhaven, and began portioning out a meal. Grasha watched him with interest, and he found himself offering her one of the apples without really thinking about it. "Thank you," she said, accepting it with genuine pleasure. She bit into it with strong white teeth, and juice ran down her chin. She wiped it away unself-consciously, grinning. "It has been a while since I had fruit. The Ironwood clan lives primarily on meat and foraged plants." "What will you do now?" Philip asked, settling down across the fire from her. "I mean long-term. You can't go back to your clan, and I imagine other orc tribes wouldn't exactly welcome someone who was cast out." Grasha's smile faded. "I have been trying not to think about it. The truth is, I have no idea. I'm skilled at hunting and tracking. I can fight, though I prefer not to. I know herbs and healing. But none of that matters if I have no place, no people. You could make a new place, find new people. Could I?" She looked at him across the flames, her amber eyes reflecting the firelight. "Where would I even start? Human settlements won't accept me. Other orc clans will see me as weak or disloyal. I'm trapped between two worlds belonging to neither." Philip felt a surge of protective instinct that surprised him with its intensity. "You're not weak. What you did took more courage than any raid. You stood up for what you believed was right even when it cost you everything. My father would say I was foolish. That principles are luxuries we cannot afford in a harsh world. Your father was wrong." Philip said it with absolute certainty. "A world without principles is just chaos and cruelty. You were right to refuse him, and for what it's worth, I'm glad you did. Not just because of this whole soul bond thing, but because it means there's at least one orc out there who still believes there's another way." Grasha's eyes glistened, and for a moment, Philip thought she might cry. But she blinked rapidly and turned her attention to the apple, taking another bite. "You're surprisingly kind, Philip Jensen. I was not expecting that." "What were you expecting?" "I don't know. Fear, maybe. Rejection. Certainly not acceptance." "I'm not sure I've accepted anything yet," Philip said honestly. "I still don't fully understand what's happening between us, but I'm willing to try to figure it out, and that starts with treating you like a person, not a monster. Your people see us as monsters. Some do. But I've learned that most people are too quick to judge things they don't understand. I spent a year in the Southern Territories once, mapping the coastline. There was a community there that believed anyone with red hair was cursed by demons. They would drive out red-headed children, leave them to die in the wilderness. The first time I saw it happen, I couldn't believe it. All that cruelty based on nothing but superstition and fear. What did you do?" "I helped the family escape. Guided them to a different town where hair color didn't matter. It wasn't much, but it was something." Philip poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling into the darkening sky. "I guess what I'm saying is that I've seen enough of the world to know that hatred is usually born from ignorance, and I'd rather not be ignorant." Grasha was quiet for a long time, studying him with an intensity that made Philip feel exposed. Finally, she said, "My grandmother would have liked you. I wish I could have met her. She died when I was 16. Old age, which is rare among our people. Most orcs die in battle or from disease or injury long before their hair turns gray. But grandmother lived to see 70 winters. She said it was because she never let hatred poison her heart." Grasha smiled, but it was bittersweet. My father hated that about her, said she filled my head with soft notions and foolish dreams. She sounds like she was wise. She was. She told me once that the greatest strength is not the ability to destroy your enemies, but the ability to turn them into allies. I didn't understand what she meant at the time. I was too young, too eager to prove myself as a warrior, but I think I'm starting to understand now. They talked long into the night, the conversation flowing more easily than Philip would have thought possible. Grasha told him stories about growing up in the Ironwood clan, about the brutal training regimen all young orcs endured, about the complex social hierarchies, and the constant pressure to prove one's worth through combat prowess. Philip shared his own stories, his childhood in a small village, his parents' death, his years of wandering before finding his calling as a surveyor. At some point, the conversation lulled, and they simply sat together in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn down to embers. Philip found himself feeling more at peace than he had in months, despite the absolute strangeness of the situation. There was something about Grasha's presence that calmed him, that made the wilderness feel less lonely. "You should get some sleep," Grasha said eventually. "I'll keep watch." "You need rest too. Orcs need less sleep than humans. I'll wake you in a few hours and you can take second watch." Philip wanted to argue but found himself yawning instead. The day's walk combined with the emotional intensity of everything that had happened had left him exhausted. "All right. But wake me if anything happens." "I will." Philip crawled into his tent, which suddenly felt very small and inadequate compared to sleeping under the stars. But it was shelter, and that was what mattered. He wrapped himself in his bedroll and closed his eyes, certain that his racing thoughts would keep him awake. He was asleep within minutes. When Philip woke, it was to the smell of cooking meat and the soft sound of Grasha humming. He emerged from his tent to find dawn breaking over the mountains, the sky painted in shades of pink and gold. Grasha had apparently been productive during her watch. 3 fat rabbits were roasting over a rebuilt fire, and she had gathered a pile of edible plants that she was sorting into Philip's cookpot. "You didn't wake me for second watch," Philip said, trying to sound stern and failing. Grasha glanced up at him, unrepentant. "You needed the sleep, and I told you orcs need less rest than humans. I'm fine. Still, we had an agreement. We also have an agreement about following my lead in the wilderness. I'm leading." She gestured to the food. "Breakfast will be ready soon. There's a stream just beyond those rocks if you want to wash up." Philip took her advice, splashing cold water on his face and feeling more human as the last cobwebs of sleep cleared from his mind. When he returned to camp, Grasha had portioned out the rabbit and greens, and they ate together as the sun climbed higher in the sky. "The terrain gets more difficult from here," Grasha said between bites. "We'll be climbing for most of the day. But there's something I want to show you if you're willing to take a detour." "What kind of something?" Her eyes gleamed with excitement. "A place my grandmother told me about. She said it was proof that humans and orcs once lived in harmony. I've never been able to find it on my own, but now that I'm seeing this territory from a human perspective, I think I know where it might be." Philip's surveyor instincts perked up. "A settlement, the ruins of one. If it exists at all, it might just be a legend." "I'd love to see it," Philip said honestly. "Even if it turns out to be nothing, it would be worth documenting. Unknown ruins could mean all kinds of things: trade routes, defensive positions, cultural significance." Grasha's smile was brilliant. "Then we have a plan." They broke camp quickly and set out into the rising day. The terrain did indeed become more challenging, transitioning from forest to rocky hillside dotted with stunted pines and hardy scrub brush. Philip's legs burned with the climb, but Grasha moved ahead of him with the grace of a mountain goat, occasionally pausing to point out landmarks or to offer him a hand over particularly treacherous sections. By midday, they had climbed high enough that Philip could see for miles in every direction. To the south, he could just make out the smudge of smoke that marked Thornhaven. To the north and west, the mountains continued in an endless series of ridges and valleys, wild and unexplored. And somewhere out there, hidden among all that wilderness, was whatever Grasha was looking for. "There," Grasha said suddenly, pointing to a valley below them. "Do you see it? The way the trees grow in that pattern." Philip shaded his eyes and looked where she indicated. At first he saw nothing unusual, just more forest. But then his trained eye picked up on what she meant. The trees grew in suspiciously straight lines, as if following some underlying structure. And in the center of the pattern, there was a break in the canopy, a space that suggested something other than natural growth. "Could be anything," he said, trying to manage his expectations. "Old logging camp, forest fire pattern, but it's worth investigating." They descended into the valley, and with each step Philip's excitement grew. He had mapped enough territory to recognize the signs of human habitation, and this place was showing all of them. The straight lines resolved into what might have been streets or boundaries. The clearing in the center revealed itself to be a meadow that was too regular to be natural, surrounded by what looked like deliberately planted fruit trees, now run wild. And then they emerged into the ruins themselves, and Philip stopped breathing. Stone foundations spread out before them, marking where buildings had once stood. Most were small houses, perhaps, or workshops, but there were several larger structures that might have been communal spaces. What made Philip's heart race, though, were the markings carved into the stones. He knelt beside the nearest foundation and traced the symbols with his fingers, recognizing some as human script while others were clearly orcish runes. "It's real," Grasha whispered, her voice filled with wonder. "It's really real." They explored for hours, documenting everything. Philip sketched maps and made notes while Grasha identified orc cultural markers and tried to piece together the settlement's purpose. What emerged was a picture of a community that had existed perhaps a century ago, where humans and orcs had lived side by side, likely sustained by trade and agriculture. "Look at this," Grasha called from across the ruins. Philip hurried over to find her standing beside what had once been a large building, its stone walls still partially intact. "These carvings, they're family markers. This one shows an orc family. You can tell by the tusk symbolism and the mountain motifs. And this one beside it is clearly human, with their wheat and sun symbols. But look at this third one." Philip studied the carving she indicated. It showed elements of both traditions, blended together in a way that was harmonious rather than conflicting. "A mixed family," he said, understanding. "Human and orc living together, maybe even married." "It was possible once," Grasha said softly. "People made it work. They built something beautiful here. What happened to them? War, probably, or disease. Maybe they were driven out by people on both sides who couldn't accept what they were doing. But for a time, at least, they proved it could be done. They proved that there's another way." Philip looked at Grasha, at the hope and determination in her face, and felt something shift in his chest. He had been trying to maintain emotional distance, to treat this whole situation as a temporary partnership. But standing here in the ruins of a place that represented everything they might be able to build together, he found his resistance crumbling. "Grasha," he said carefully. "This soul bond thing, if it's real, and I'm not saying I'm convinced, but if it is, what exactly does it mean? What would be expected of us?" She turned to face him fully, her amber eyes serious. "Among my people, a soul bond is sacred. It's considered a gift from the ancestors, a sign that two people are meant to walk through life together. It doesn't mean automatic compatibility or eternal happiness. It means that you have the potential to build something extraordinary with each other, if you're both willing to do the work. And is it always romantic? Or could it be something else? It's whatever the two people make of it. But usually, yes, it develops into a romantic partnership. Because the bond runs deep, Philip. It's not just attraction or affection. It's recognizing someone on a soul level. Seeing them and being seen in return. Philip's heart was pounding. I'm not sure I believe in destiny or fate or ancestors choosing partners for us, but I can't deny that I feel something when I'm around you, something I've never felt before. It's like you said, a pull, a sense of rightness. Grasha took a step toward him, then stopped, visibly restraining herself. What are you saying? I'm saying that maybe we shouldn't fight this so hard. Maybe we should see where it leads. Philip took a breath, committing to the words even as his rational mind screamed that this was crazy. I still think we need to take things slow, get to know each other properly, but I'm willing to acknowledge that this might be more than just traveling companions. The joy that lit up Grasha's face was like the sun breaking through storm clouds. She crossed the space between them in 2 long strides, and for a moment, Philip thought she might embrace him. But she stopped just short of touching him, her hands hovering uncertainly in the air between them. "May I?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Philip nodded, not trusting himself to speak. Grasha placed her palms against his chest over his heart, and he felt that electric connection surge through him. Without thinking, he covered her hands with his own, holding them in place. They stood like that, barely touching and yet more connected than Philip had ever felt with another person, while the wind whispered through the ruins around them. "Thank you," Grasha said finally, "for giving this a chance, for giving us a chance. Don't thank me yet. We still have to figure out how to make this work in a world that's going to hate us for trying." "One problem at a time," Grasha said with a slight smile. "First, we survive. Then we figure out how to live." They spent the rest of the afternoon in the ruins, and by the time they set up camp in one of the more intact buildings, Philip had filled several pages of his journal with sketches and notes. This discovery alone would justify his expedition, even if he never mapped another inch of territory. But more than that, the ruins gave him hope. If humans and orcs had lived together in peace once, perhaps they could do so again. Perhaps he and Grasha could be the beginning of something new or the revival of something old. That night, they sat side by side rather than across the fire from each other, shoulders almost touching. Grasha pointed out constellations and told him the orc stories associated with them, tales of hunters and heroes, of spirits and sacred mountains. In return, Philip shared human stories about the same stars, and they marveled at how different peoples could look at the same sky and see completely different meanings. "I've never told anyone these stories before," Grasha admitted. The younglings in the clan were more interested in combat training than in grandmother's tales. They thought I was strange for caring about such things. "I don't think you're strange. I think you're remarkable." Grasha turned to look at him, and in the firelight, her green skin seemed to glow from within. "You are unlike any human I ever imagined, Philip Jensen. Same to you. And I mean that as a compliment." She laughed, and the sound filled the ruined settlement with life. "I will take it as one." Over the following days, they settled into a rhythm. Grasha guided them through territories that Philip never would have been able to navigate alone: hidden valleys, mountain passes known only to orc hunters, river crossings that appeared impassable until you knew exactly where to step. And everywhere they went, Philip mapped and documented, recording a side of the wilderness that no other human surveyor had ever seen. They talked constantly, sharing stories and opinions and dreams. Philip learned that Grasha loved thunderstorms, that she could identify over 100 different bird calls, that she had a wicked sense of humor that caught him off guard and made him laugh until his sides hurt. Grasha learned that Philip was terrible at cooking but excellent at mending torn clothing, that he had a habit of muttering to himself while he worked, that he harbored a secret dream of writing a book about his travels that would change how humans viewed the wilderness. They also learned about each other's pain. Grasha shared the loneliness of growing up different in a clan that valued conformity, of watching her grandmother slowly fade while knowing that her father's influence was growing stronger. Philip talked about the guilt he still carried over his parents' deaths, how he had been away when the plague struck and had returned to find them already buried, how he had never gotten to say goodbye, and through it all, the bond between them grew stronger. It was subtle at first, a hand lingering a moment too long when helping each other over obstacles, eyes meeting across the fire and holding, the way they had begun to sleep closer together, drawn by some instinct neither quite understood, but it was undeniable. On the 8th day of their journey together, they ran into trouble. They were following a game trail through dense forest when Grasha suddenly stopped, her head tilted in a listening posture. Philip froze, trusting her instincts. A moment later he heard it, two voices, speaking in the common tongue but with harsh accents. Hunters, perhaps, or trappers. "Hide," Grasha hissed, already moving toward a dense thicket, but Philip caught her arm. "Wait. These might be people I can talk to. If they're from one of the frontier settlements, they might have information about the Northern Territories. Or they might try to kill me on sight. I won't let that happen." Philip said it with absolute certainty, surprised by the protective fury that surged through him at the thought of anyone hurting her. Grasha searched his face, then nodded reluctantly. "I'll stay close. But Philip, if this goes badly, it won't." He hoped he was right. They emerged from the trees into a small clearing where 3 men were skinning a deer. The men looked up sharply, hands moving immediately to weapons, knives, a hand axe, a short hunting bow. "Easy," Philip called out, raising his hands in a peaceful gesture. "I'm just a surveyor traveling through." "Philip Jensen, out of Thornhaven." The men relaxed slightly, though their eyes remained wary. They were all rough-looking, weathered by years of frontier life, dressed in the practical garments of professional hunters. The oldest of them, a gray-bearded man with a scar running down one cheek, stepped forward. "Thornhaven's a long way south. You're pretty far out for surveying work." "I go where the guild sends me. They want maps of the Northern Territories. Dangerous work, traveling alone out here." "Orc country." The man's eyes narrowed. "Though I suppose you know that." Philip felt Grasha tense behind him, still hidden in the tree line. "I'm aware of the risks. Then you're braver or more foolish than most." The man gestured to their kill. "We're heading back to Millbrook small settlement about a day east of here. You're welcome to travel with us if you want. Safety in numbers." It was a generous offer, and exactly the kind of opportunity Philip should have jumped at. But accepting meant leaving Grasha behind, and that was unthinkable. "I appreciate the offer, but I'm on a tight schedule. Can't afford the detour." One of the younger hunters, a lean man with suspicious eyes, spoke up. "You sure you're alone out here?" "Thought I caught sight of something moving in the trees." "Probably a deer," Philip said casually. "I saw a doe pass through earlier. Funny, because it looked bigger than a deer, moved different too." The man's hand went to his bow. "Almost looked like me," Grasha said, stepping out of the trees. Her voice was calm, but Philip saw the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands hung loose at her sides, ready to fight or flee. The reaction was instantaneous. All 3 men scrambled for weapons, shouting warnings at each other. The gray-bearded leader had his knife out, his face twisted in a mixture of fear and fury. "Gods above, boy, you're traveling with a greenskin." "Her name is Grasha," Philip said firmly, moving to place himself between the hunters and her. "And she's my guide. She's been helping me navigate the northern territories." "Your guide?" The young hunter with the bow had an arrow nocked now, aimed directly at Grasha. "Or your prisoner?" "Because I can't think of any other reason a human would be traveling with an orc. She's neither. She's my partner." The word felt right as soon as Philip said it, more right than anything had in a long time. "Your partner." The gray-bearded man said it like a curse. "Boy, do you have any idea what you're saying, what you're doing? Orcs are monsters, savages. They've killed countless people in these territories. My own brother died in an orc raid 15 years ago." "I'm sorry for your loss," Philip said sincerely, "but Grasha isn't responsible for that. She's not even part of her clan anymore. She was cast out for refusing to participate in raids." "And you believe that?" The third hunter, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. He was middle-aged, stocky, with the look of someone who had seen too much violence. "You believe what an orc tells you?" "Yes." Philip held his ground even as his heart hammered in his chest. "I do. Because I've spent over a week with her and I've seen her character. She's honest and brave and kind. Everything you think you know about orcs, everything you've been taught, it doesn't apply to her." "Or maybe she's playing you," the young hunter snarled. "Maybe she's leading you into an ambush. Maybe her war band is waiting just over the next ridge to cut you down." Grasha's voice rang out strong and clear. "If I wanted him dead, he would already be dead. I could have killed him a dozen times over during the past 8 days. I could have killed him the moment I found him. But I didn't, because I have no desire to kill anyone." The gray-bearded man stared at her, then at Philip. "You're both mad. You do realize that, don't you? This can't end well. Even if she's telling the truth about her intentions, what kind of life do you think you'll have? Where will you go? What human settlement is going to accept an orc? What orc clan is going to accept a human?" "I don't know," Philip admitted. "We're figuring it out as we go, but that doesn't mean we're wrong to try." For a long moment no one moved. Then the gray-bearded man slowly lowered his knife. "Put the bow down, Garrett. They're not worth the arrow." The young hunter looked like he wanted to argue, but after a moment he eased the tension on his bowstring. "This is a mistake, Thomas. Mark my words, this will end in blood." "Maybe, but it's not our business." Thomas looked at Philip with something that might have been pity. "Go on, then. Continue north if you're so determined. But don't say we didn't warn you, and don't expect help from any settlement in these territories. Word will spread that you're traveling with an orc. After that, you'll be lucky if people don't shoot you on sight along with her." Philip felt Grasha's hand touch his shoulder, a gentle pressure. He covered it with his own, making a statement without words. "Thank you for the warning. We'll take our chances." The hunters gathered their things quickly, clearly eager to be away from them. As they disappeared into the forest, Philip heard the one called Garrett muttering something about race traitors and getting what he deserves. He tried not to let the words sting, but they did. "That could have gone worse," Grasha said once they were alone again. "Could have gone better too." Philip turned to face her, seeing the worry in her eyes. "They're right about one thing, though. Word will spread. If those men make it back to Millbrook and talk about what they saw, within a week every settlement in the territory will know there's a human traveling with an orc. That's going to make things more difficult. You could still turn back. Go to Thornhaven, file your maps, take another assignment somewhere else. Somewhere safe." She said it quietly, and Philip realized she was giving him an out, a chance to walk away before things got more complicated. He should take it. He knew he should. The smart thing, the safe thing, would be to thank Grasha for her help and go their separate ways. but the thought of not seeing her again made his chest ache in a way that was almost physical. "I'm not turning back," he said. "Not unless you want me to." Grasha's eyes searched his face. "What I want and what's wise might be two different things. Probably are. So tell me what you want." "I want you to stay. I want to keep traveling with you, keep learning about you, keep building whatever this thing between us is becoming. But Philip, I'm scared. Not of the hunters or the danger or the journey. I'm scared of how much I'm starting to care about you. It's only been 8 days, but I feel like I've known you my entire life. And if something happens to you because of me..." Philip closed the distance between them and took both her hands in his. "Nothing is going to happen to me. We'll be careful. We'll avoid settlements where we can, and when we can't, we'll handle it together. We've made it this far. We can keep going. You're sure?" "I'm sure." And as he said it, Philip realized it was true. For the first time since his parents died, he felt like he had found something worth fighting for, worth risking everything for. Not just the maps or the discovery of the ruins, but Grasha herself. This fierce, beautiful, impossible woman who had crashed into his life and turned everything upside down. Grasha squeezed his hands, then did something unexpected. She raised his right hand to her lips and pressed a kiss to his knuckles, her tusks brushing gently against his skin. It was a gesture that was somehow both tender and reverent, and it sent shivers down Philip's spine. "Among my people," she said softly, "when a warrior swears loyalty to another, they mark it with a kiss to the hands. The hands that will fight beside them, work beside them, build beside them. I swear my loyalty to you, Philip Jensen. Whatever comes, we face it together." Philip's throat felt tight. "I swear the same to you, Grasha. Whatever comes, we face it together." They stood there in the forest, hands clasped, and Philip felt the bond between them solidify into something unbreakable. This was no longer about curiosity or even attraction. This was commitment. This was choosing each other despite everything that stood against them. They traveled for 3 more days, moving deeper into territory that appeared on no human maps. Grasha led them through a landscape of stunning beauty, alpine meadows carpeted with wildflowers, crystalline lakes that reflected the sky like mirrors, forests so ancient and vast that walking through them felt like stepping into another world entirely. Philip mapped everything, filling his journals with sketches and notes that would be invaluable to anyone who came after them. But more than that, he was documenting their journey, the private geography of their growing relationship. He sketched Grasha as she stood on a ridge looking out over the mountains, her hair whipping in the wind. He wrote about the way she laughed when he told her stories about his disastrous attempts at learning to fish as a child. He documented the night they sat up late talking about what it meant to belong somewhere, to have a home. On the 11th night, they made camp in a cave that Grasha said had been used by orc shamans for generations as a place of meditation and spiritual seeking. The walls were covered in paintings, ancient images of orcs and humans and all manner of creatures, all woven together in a pattern that suggested unity rather than conflict. "My grandmother brought me here once," Grasha said, running her fingers over the paintings. "She said this place was sacred to the old ways, that people used to come here to ask the ancestors for guidance when they faced impossible choices." "Did you ask them?" Philip asked. "For guidance?" "I did, but I was young and impatient. I wanted answers immediately, and when none came, I decided the stories were just myths." She smiled ruefully. "I wish I had paid better attention. Maybe I would have been better prepared for all of this. I don't think anything could have prepared us for this." Grasha turned to look at him, her amber eyes reflecting the firelight. "Philip, can I ask you something? And will you give me an honest answer, always? Do you regret it, any of this? I know I've made your life infinitely more complicated. I know I've put you at risk. If you could go back to that morning on the trail and choose not to let me come with you, would you? Philip thought about it, really thought about it. His life had been simpler before Grasha, safer, more predictable. But it had also been lonelier, emptier, lacking in the kind of profound connection he had found with her. No, he said finally. I wouldn't change it. These past 11 days have been the most alive I've felt in years. You haven't made my life more complicated, Grasha. You've made it more meaningful. She let out a breath that might have been relief or something deeper. I feel the same. Being with you, I finally understand what my grandmother meant about soul bonds. It's not about destiny forcing people together. It's about recognizing someone who sees you really sees you and choosing to see them in return. Philip stood and crossed to where she stood by the painted walls. I see you, Grasha. I see your strength and your kindness and your courage. I see how much it cost you to stand up to your father, and I see how much it hurts you to be separated from your clan even though you know you made the right choice. I see all of you, and he paused, the words catching in his throat. You what? Grasha asked softly. I care about you, deeply. More than I probably should after such a short time, but I can't help it. You've gotten under my skin in the best possible way. Grasha reached up and cupped his face in her hands, her palms warm against his skin. May I kiss you? Philip's heart stuttered. Yes. She leaned in slowly, giving him time to change his mind, but there was no chance of that. When her lips met his, Philip felt like he had been struck by lightning. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, both of them learning the shape of each other. But then, Grasha made a small sound in the back of her throat, and Philip's arms came up to wrap around her, pulling her closer. She was so warm, so solid in his arms, and kissing her felt like coming home to a place he had never been. Her tusks brushed against his lips, a sensation that was strange and wonderful and uniquely her. When they finally broke apart, both of them breathing hard, Philip rested his forehead against hers. That was. He couldn't find words. I know, Grasha whispered. I know. They kissed again, deeper this time, and Philip felt the last of his reservations crumble away. This was right. This was meant to be. Whatever challenges they faced, whatever prejudice and hardship waited for them in the world beyond this cave, they would face it together. When they finally settled down for the night, it was with Grasha curled against Philip's side, her head resting on his chest. He stroked her hair, marveling at how soft it was, how perfectly she fit against him. What do we do now? He asked quietly. We keep going. We finish your survey. And then, Grasha paused. Then we find a place for ourselves. Maybe we build our own settlement like the one we found in the valley, a place where others like us could go, humans and orcs who want to choose another path. That's ambitious. Is it? Or is it just necessary? How many others are out there like us, Philip? How many humans and orcs who are tired of the hatred and the fighting? What if we could give them an alternative? Philip thought about the ruins, about the families who had built something beautiful in defiance of the world's expectations. It would be hard, probably impossible, but maybe that's exactly why we have to try. So we're really doing this, building a life together, if you'll have me. Grasha lifted her head to look at him, and in her eyes, Philip saw his own feelings reflected hope and fear, and a love that was still new but growing stronger by the day. I'll have you, Philip Jensen, for as long as you'll stay. Then you're stuck with me, because I'm not going anywhere. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, and Philip dreamed of a future that was uncertain but filled with possibility. The next morning, everything changed. They had been traveling for perhaps an hour when Grasha stopped abruptly, her head tilted in that listening posture Philip had come to recognize. But this time, her entire body went rigid with tension, and her hand moved to the knife at her belt. What is it? Philip asked, already knowing he was not going to like the answer. My clan. They're close. Grasha's voice was tight with barely controlled emotion. I can hear them, smell them. Philip, we need to go now. But it was too late. Even as she spoke, figures emerged from the trees around them, 6 orcs, all warriors, all armed. They formed a loose circle, cutting off any chance of escape, and at their center was an orc who could only be Grasha's father. He was massive, even for an orc, with scars crisscrossing his green skin and tusks that had been capped with silver. His eyes, the same amber shade as Grasha's, fixed on his daughter with an expression that mixed fury and something that might have been disappointment. Grasha, he said, his voice like grinding stones, you shame yourself further by running when you see your clan approach, and in the company of a human no less. I'm not running, father, I'm living. Grasha stepped forward, placing herself slightly in front of Philip. And Philip is none of your concern. Everything you do is my concern. You are my daughter, however much you have dishonored that title. The chieftain's eyes flicked to Philip, dismissive and cold. And this human is very much my concern if he has corrupted you, turned you against your own kind. He hasn't corrupted me. He's shown me kindness and respect. He's treated me like a person rather than a weapon to be aimed at his enemies. One of the other warriors, a female orc with a battle axe strapped across her back, spoke up. Grasha, please, come home. The clan needs you. We can work through this. Cathra, Grasha said, and Philip heard pain in her voice. You know I can't. Nothing has changed. Father still wants me to lead raids against innocent people. He still thinks the only path forward is violence and conquest. The only path forward is survival, the chieftain growled. The humans are encroaching on our lands, pushing us further into the mountains with each passing year. If we don't fight back, we will be destroyed. I thought you understood that. I thought I had raised a warrior. You raised a killer, Grasha shot back. There's a difference, and I refuse to become what you want me to be. The chieftain's face darkened, and for a moment Philip thought he might attack his own daughter. But then his expression shifted, becoming calculating. This human has poisoned your mind. Very well. We will remove the poison. He gestured to his warriors. Kill him. Quickly. Then perhaps Grasha will remember where her true loyalties lie. The warriors moved forward, and Philip's hand went to his knife even though he knew it was useless against 6 trained orc warriors. But before anyone could close the distance, Grasha's voice rang out with absolute authority. Stop! To Philip's amazement, the warriors actually stopped. Grasha stood tall, her entire bearing that of a warrior queen despite having no clan, no army, nothing but her own conviction. You want me to remember where my loyalties lie, father? Fine. They lie with honor, with integrity, with choosing to be better than our worst instincts. And they lie with this man, who has shown me more respect and understanding in 11 days than you have in my entire life. Grasha, Philip started, but she cut him off with a sharp gesture. Philip, stay behind me. I'm going to challenge my father. She said it calmly, as if she was not suggesting something that would almost certainly end in death or exile. What? No. Grasha, you can't. It's the only way. If I defeat him in single combat, the clan's leadership passes to me. I can end the raids, I can change our path, and I can protect you. The chieftain laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. You challenge me. You who have been soft since childhood. You who refused your trial of adulthood. You think you can stand against me. I know I can. Because I'm fighting for something you've forgotten, father. I'm fighting for a future where orcs are more than just killers, where we can live with honor and pride without needing to bathe in blood. A tense silence fell over the clearing. Philip wanted to argue, wanted to drag Grasha away from this confrontation, but he knew her well enough now to understand that she had made up her mind. And more than that, he realized this was something she needed to do not just for him, but for herself. The chieftain studied his daughter for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Very well. I accept your challenge, but know this, Grasha, when I defeat you, I will not be merciful, and your human will die slowly as payment for the corruption he has brought to my clan." "When I defeat you," Grasha corrected, "you will step down as chieftain and you will accept whatever changes I choose to make. Those are the terms." "Agreed." The warriors formed a circle, creating a space for the combat. Philip started to move forward to protest, to do something, but the female orc called Cathra caught his arm. "Don't interfere," she said quietly. "This is clan business. If you interrupt, they will kill you both. I can't just stand here and watch. You can and you will. Because if you truly care about Grasha, you'll respect her strength and her choice." Philip wanted to argue, but the words died in his throat as he watched Grasha face her father. She had removed her knife and set it aside, and the chieftain had done the same. This would be a test of pure combat skill, strength against strength, warrior against warrior. They circled each other slowly, both looking for an opening. The chieftain was larger, more experienced, scarred from 100 battles. But Grasha was younger, faster, and Philip could see the determination burning in her eyes. She was not just fighting for dominance. She was fighting for everything they could be together, for a future that no one else believed was possible. The chieftain struck first, a sweeping blow that would have sent Grasha sprawling if it had connected. But she ducked under it, pivoting smoothly and landing a solid hit to his ribs. The chieftain grunted but did not slow, coming at her again with a combination of strikes that forced her back. They fought in silence, the only sounds the impact of flesh on flesh and the harsh breathing of combatants pushed to their limits. Philip watched with his heart in his throat, flinching every time the chieftain landed a blow, cheering silently when Grasha got through his defenses. Around him, the other warriors watched with expressions ranging from concern to grim satisfaction. The fight seemed to last forever and no time at all. Grasha was holding her own, but Philip could see her tiring. The chieftain, for all his age and scars, was a veteran warrior who knew how to pace himself in a prolonged fight. And when he saw his opening, he took it a vicious strike that caught Grasha in the shoulder and sent her stumbling. She went down hard, and the chieftain moved in for what should have been the finishing blow. But Grasha rolled at the last second, using her father's momentum against him. She swept his legs, and suddenly it was the chieftain who was falling. Grasha was on him in an instant, her arm locked across his throat in a chokehold that would render him unconscious if held long enough. "Yield," Grasha demanded, her voice ragged. "Yield, father, please. I don't want to hurt you more than I already have." For a moment, Philip thought the chieftain would refuse, would force Grasha to choke him out or worse. But then something in his expression shifted, and he tapped his hand against the ground 3 times the orc's signal for surrender. Grasha released him immediately and stood on shaking legs. Around them, the warriors were staring in shock. The female orc, Cathra, stepped forward and knelt, pressing her fist to her chest in a gesture of respect. "I acknowledge Grasha, daughter of Dragar, as chieftain of the Ironwood clan. Her will is our will, her path is our path." One by one, the other warriors knelt as well, repeating the oath. Even the chieftain, former chieftain now, eventually pushed himself to his feet and gave his daughter a curt nod of acknowledgement. "You have won, Grasha. The clan is yours. I hope you do not destroy everything I built." "I hope I can save it," Grasha replied. She swayed slightly, and Philip could not hold back any longer. He pushed through the circle of warriors and caught her before she could fall. "I've got you," he said softly, supporting her weight. "You did it. Gods, you actually did it." Grasha leaned against him and he felt her tremble with exhaustion and relief. I couldn't have done it without you, without knowing what I was fighting for. What happens now? She looked up at him, then at the warriors surrounding them. Now we see if I can actually change anything. Cathra, call a clan gathering. Everyone needs to hear what I have to say. The gathering was held that evening in a clearing that the Ironwood clan used for important meetings. Philip stood slightly behind Grasha, who had cleaned up and changed into formal clothing that marked her as chieftain, a leather vest decorated with clan symbols, a cloak made from wolf fur, and a circlet of bronze that sat on her brow. The entire clan had assembled warriors, elders, families with younglings, perhaps 60 orcs in all, every one of them watching Grasha with expressions that ranged from hopeful to skeptical to outright hostile. The former chieftain sat in the back, his face unreadable. Grasha stepped forward, and when she spoke, her voice carried across the clearing. I stand before you as your new chieftain, chosen by combat according to our oldest laws. I know many of you have doubts. You wonder if I am strong enough, wise enough to lead you. You wonder if I will dishonor the clan with soft choices and weak policies. She paused, letting the words sink in. I'm here to tell you that strength is not the same as cruelty, that honor is not the same as bloodshed, that we can be fierce warriors without being mindless killers. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. An older orc, bent with age but still formidable, spoke up. And what of the humans who encroach on our lands? What of their settlements that spread like disease? Do we simply accept being pushed further into the mountains? No. But we don't have to meet them with only violence. There are other ways. Grasha gestured to Philip. This is Philip Jensen, a human surveyor. He is also my soul bond, acknowledged and accepted. He has traveled with me through our lands, and he has seen us not as monsters but as people. And I have seen his people the same way. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Half the clan erupted in angry shouts while others sat in stunned silence. The former chieftain stood, his voice cutting through the chaos. You would bring a human into our clan. Have you lost your mind entirely? I would show our clan that there is another path, that humans and orcs can coexist, that we can build something better than endless cycles of revenge and hatred. Grasha's voice rang with conviction. I have seen the ruins of a settlement where our peoples lived together in peace. I have seen proof that this is possible, and I intend to make it possible again. The humans will never accept us, someone called out. They fear us, hate us. Nothing we do will change that. Perhaps not all of them, but some will. And that's where we start, with individuals choosing to see beyond their prejudice, with building bridges one person at a time. Grasha looked around at her clan. I'm not asking you to stop being warriors. I'm not asking you to become weak or submissive. I'm asking you to be wise. To choose our battles carefully. To protect our lands without needlessly killing people who might become allies instead of enemies. An elderly female orc stood, her gray hair braided with beads. You speak like your grandmother, child. She had these same dreams. But the world broke her heart over and over until there was nothing left but sorrow. What makes you think you will fare any better? Because I'm not alone. Grasha reached back and took Philip's hand, pulling him forward to stand beside her. Because I have someone who believes in this vision as much as I do. Because we have each other, and maybe that's enough to start changing things. Philip squeezed her hand, then addressed the clan himself. I know you have no reason to trust me. I'm a human, and humans have hurt your people. But I'm also someone who's seen enough of the world to know that hatred only breeds more hatred. That violence only leads to more violence. Grasha is offering you a chance to break that cycle, to be remembered not as raiders and savages, but as the clan that chose a different path. The gathering continued for hours, with arguments and debates flowing back and forth. But gradually, Philip began to see the tide turning. The younger warriors were especially receptive, tired of fighting battles their elders had started. The families with younglings saw the appeal of a future where their children might not have to grow up constantly at war. By the time the gathering ended, Grasha had secured a tentative support from perhaps 2/3 of the clan. It was not unanimous, and Philip knew there would be challenges ahead. But it was a start. That night, as they lay together in the chieftain's dwelling, now Grasha's dwelling, Philip held her close and marveled at everything that had changed in just 12 days. "You know this is going to be complicated," he said softly. "Even if your clan accepts me, my people won't be so quick to change their minds about orcs. I know, but we'll work on them too. We'll show them the same thing I'm trying to show my clan, that there's another way." Grasha turned in his arms to face him. "Philip, I need to ask you something, and I need you to think carefully before answering." "All right. Will you stay here, not just tonight but permanently? Will you become part of this clan, help me build this vision of a different future? I know it means giving up your life in Thornhaven, your work as a surveyor. I know it's asking everything of you, but her voice caught. I love you. I have loved you from the moment I caught your scent on the wind, and I want to build a life with you, here, with our people." Philip felt his eyes sting with unexpected tears. "Our people, I like the sound of that." He kissed her softly, tenderly. "Yes, I'll stay, I'll help you build this, because I love you too, Grasha, and because I believe in what you're trying to do." She kissed him back, deeper this time, and Philip felt the bond between them solidify into something unbreakable. This was his home now. Not a place, but a person. Not safety, but purpose. And it was everything he had been searching for without knowing it. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Grasha worked tirelessly to reshape the clan's policies, ending the practice of raiding human settlements, and instead focusing on defending their own territory. She sent emissaries to neighboring orc clans, sharing her vision and trying to build alliances based on something other than mutual hatred of humans. Philip, meanwhile, began the delicate work of reaching out to human settlements. He wrote letters to the guild in Thornhaven, to the mayor, to anyone he thought might be willing to listen. He described the Ironwood clan's change in direction, the opportunity for peaceful coexistence, the mutual benefits that could come from trade and cooperation rather than conflict. The responses were mixed. Some dismissed his letters as the ravings of someone who had gone native. Others were cautiously interested, but wanted proof that the changes were real and lasting. A few, like the mayor of a small frontier town called Ashford, were willing to take a chance. It was decided that Philip would lead a delegation to Ashford, 2 orc warriors, himself and Cathra, who had become Grasha's closest advisor. The goal was simple: establish peaceful contact, discuss trade possibilities, and show that orcs could be negotiated with rather than simply fought. The night before they left, Grasha held Philip close, her worry evident. "Be careful. I know Cathra and the others will protect you, but humans can be unpredictable. If anything happens to you, nothing will happen. We're going to walk into that town, talk to some nervous farmers, and walk back out. It will be fine. Promise me." "I promise." Philip kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "I'll come back to you, always." The journey to Ashford took 3 days. The town was smaller than Philip expected. Perhaps 30 buildings clustered around a central square, surrounded by farmland that had been carved out of the forest through backbreaking labor. As they approached, Philip saw people stopping to stare, saw children being pulled indoors, saw men reaching for weapons. He raised his hands in a peaceful gesture and called out, "We're here to talk, not to fight. I'm Philip Jensen, surveyor, and these are representatives of the Ironwood clan. We've come to speak with your mayor." A tense silence followed, and then a stout woman emerged from what appeared to be the town hall. She was perhaps 50, with iron-gray hair and the weathered hands of someone who had done hard physical labor their entire life. Her eyes swept over the group, lingering on the orcs with obvious wariness. "I'm Mayor Redding. I received your letters." She crossed her arms. "I'm willing to talk, but my people are scared. Can you blame them?" "Not at all," Philip said honestly. "But being scared doesn't have to mean being enemies. The Ironwood clan has changed their policies. They're no longer raiding human settlements. They're looking for a different path. And I'm supposed to just take your word for that. The word of a man who's apparently living with orcs." Cathra stepped forward and several townspeople flinched, but her voice was calm and measured. "You don't have to take anyone's word. Let us prove it through actions. We are willing to establish trade. We have furs, herbs, knowledge of the wilderness that could benefit your people. In return, we would ask for metal tools, perhaps seeds for crops we cannot grow in the mountains. A mutually beneficial arrangement." Mayor Redding studied Cathra for a long moment. "You speak well for an orc. Most of the ones we've encountered just scream and try to kill us." "Most humans we've encountered do the same," Cathra replied with a slight smile. "Perhaps we have more in common than we realized." The mayor actually laughed at that, a brief sound of genuine amusement. "Perhaps we do. All right, come to the hall, we'll talk terms, but I make no promises." "And if this is some kind of trick, it's not," Philip assured her. "I give you my word." The negotiations took most of the day. There were tense moments, misunderstandings that had to be carefully navigated, old wounds that flared up in angry accusations. But slowly, painfully, they made progress. By the time the sun began to set, they had hammered out a basic trade agreement: furs and medicinal herbs in exchange for metal tools and grain. More importantly, they had opened a line of communication. As they prepared to leave, Mayor Redding pulled Philip aside. "I'm taking a huge risk with this. If those orcs break their word, if they use this as an opportunity to scout our defenses or plan an attack, it will be on my head." "They won't. I'd stake my life on it." "You are staking your life on it, and the lives of everyone in this town." She paused, then said more gently, "But I hope you're right. Gods know we could use fewer enemies and more trading partners. This frontier is hard enough without constantly fighting each other." Philip returned to the Ironwood clan with news of their success, and Grasha greeted him with a kiss that took his breath away. "You did it," she said, her eyes shining. "You actually did it. We did it. This is just the beginning." And it was. Over the following months, the trade relationship with Ashford grew and strengthened. Other human settlements, seeing that Ashford had not been destroyed or betrayed, began to cautiously reach out. Some orc clans, inspired by the Ironwood clan's example, began to reconsider their own policies. It was slow, often frustrating work. There were setbacks: a young orc warrior who attacked a human trader in a moment of poor judgment, a human militia that attempted to ambush an orc hunting party, misunderstandings that nearly derailed everything. But each time, Grasha and Philip worked together to fix the damage, to remind both sides that the alternative to peace was just more bloodshed. Through it all, their love deepened and matured. They learned each other's rhythms, the way couples do when they're building a life together. Philip taught Grasha to read and write in the common tongue, and she taught him the orc language and the intricate customs of her people. They discovered shared passions: a love of thunderstorms, a fascination with the stars, a quiet joy in watching the seasons change over the mountains. 6 months after that first meeting on the trail, as autumn painted the forest in shades of gold and crimson, Philip led Grasha back to the ruins of the mixed settlement they had discovered. They walked through the fallen buildings hand in hand, remembering how far they had come. "I've been thinking," Philip said as they stood beside the building with the mixed family marker carved into its foundation, "about what comes next. We've made progress with trade and diplomacy, but I keep coming back to your idea about building a place where humans and orcs can live together." "You want to rebuild this settlement?" Grasha looked around at the ruins with wonder in her eyes. "Not this one specifically, but something like it. A new settlement founded on principles of cooperation and mutual respect. A place where mixed families like the ones who lived here can exist without fear, where children can grow up learning both traditions." Philip took both her hands, his heart pounding. "A place where we can raise our own family." Grasha's breath caught. "Philip, I know it's ambitious. I know it will be incredibly difficult, but I can't stop thinking about it, about building something that outlasts us, about proving that what we have isn't just an exception, but the beginning of something bigger." He pulled a small carved wooden ring from his pocket, something he had been working on in secret for weeks. "Grasha, in both our cultures, this would be unusual, unprecedented, but I don't care. Will you marry me? Will you build this new future with me?" Tears streamed down Grasha's green cheeks as she nodded. "Yes. Gods, yes, Philip, I would marry you 1,000 times, in every tradition, human and orc. I would stand before both our peoples and declare that you are mine and I am yours." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and she pulled him into a kiss that was fierce and tender and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, both of them laughing and crying at once, Grasha pressed her forehead against his. "We're really doing this, aren't we? Building a settlement. Getting married, changing the world, one day at a time," Philip said. "Together." They were married 2 months later in a ceremony that combined human and orc traditions. The wedding took place in the valley where they had discovered the ruins, on the winter solstice, under a sky bright with stars. Half the Ironwood clan attended, along with Mayor Redding and a delegation from Ashford, and even a few representatives from other orc clans who had heard about the union and wanted to witness it. Grasha wore a dress of white leather decorated with clan symbols, her hair braided with winter flowers. Philip wore the finest clothes he owned, simple but well made, with a cloak in the Ironwood clan colors. They exchanged vows in both languages, promising to honor and cherish each other, to stand together against whatever challenges the world threw at them. When they kissed as husband and wife, the assembled crowd, human and orc alike, erupted in cheers. And in that moment, Philip felt like anything was possible. The settlement they built was named Brightwater, after the clear stream that ran through the valley. They chose the name carefully, wanting something that reflected hope and renewal rather than warfare or conquest. The first year was brutal, clearing land, building homes, establishing crops and livestock, navigating the complex social dynamics of humans and orcs living in close proximity. But slowly, Brightwater took shape. 20 families decided to join them that first year, 10 orc, 10 human. They built homes that reflected both architectural traditions, created a governing council with equal representation, established rules that protected everyone regardless of species. Children played together in the streets, learning each other's languages and games. Adults who had once seen each other as enemies learned to see each other as neighbors, friends, eventually family. Philip resumed his surveying work, but now he mapped territory with an eye toward building connections rather than claiming land. Grasha served as a bridge between worlds, her clan affiliation giving her credibility with orcs, while her marriage to Philip showed humans that peaceful coexistence was possible. They faced opposition, of course. Some orc clans saw Brightwater as a betrayal, a dilution of orc culture and strength. Some human settlements viewed it as a dangerous precedent, a sign that humans were going soft on the orc threat. There were attempted raids from both sides, tense confrontations, moments when the whole experiment seemed doomed to fail, but it endured. Because Grasha and Philip endured, their love serving as a foundation that could not be easily shaken. Because the people of Brightwater, both human and orc, discovered that there was strength in diversity, that they could accomplish together what neither group could manage alone. Because children grew up seeing cooperation as normal rather than exceptional, and they carried that perspective forward into their own lives. 2 years after their wedding, on a spring morning that smelled of apple blossoms and possibility, Grasha gave birth to their daughter. She had Philip's gray eyes and Grasha's green skin, with small tusks that were barely more than nubs and pointed ears that marked her as something entirely new, neither human nor orc, but both. They named her Alara, after Grasha's grandmother, and as Philip held his daughter for the first time, he felt his eyes fill with tears. This tiny person represented everything they had fought for, proof that two peoples divided by centuries of conflict could create something beautiful together. "She's perfect," Philip whispered, running a gentle finger over Alara's soft green cheek. "She's ours," Grasha said, her voice thick with emotion. "The first child of Brightwater, but not the last." Indeed, within a year, 3 more mixed couples in Brightwater announced pregnancies. The settlement was growing, thriving, becoming a beacon for anyone who believed there had to be another way. Traders began to stop regularly, bringing news from across the region. Other mixed communities started to form, inspired by Brightwater's example. The change was slow, incremental, measured in individual choices and small victories rather than sweeping transformations. But it was real, and it spread outward in ripples, touching lives that Philip and Grasha would never even know about. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Philip and Grasha walked back to the spot where their story had begun, the trail where she had pushed him against a tree and declared that she knew him. It felt like a lifetime ago, and yet Philip could still remember every detail with perfect clarity. The fear and confusion he had felt, the electric connection when she touched him, the way his whole world had shifted in a single moment. "You ever regret it?" Philip asked, echoing the question Grasha had posed to him years earlier. "Any of this?" Grasha looked at him, her amber eyes full of love and contentment. "Not for a single moment. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Philip Jensen. You and Alara and this life we've built together. I would do it all again in a heartbeat." "Same. God's same." Philip pulled her close, breathing in her scent, pine and leather and the unique spice that was simply Grasha. "Thank you for pushing me against that tree, for being brave enough to find out if the stories were true. Thank you for staying. For choosing me even when it would have been easier to walk away." She kissed him, soft and sweet. "I love you. I love you too, always." They stood together on the trail as the sun set over the mountains. Two people who had changed the world simply by refusing to accept that hatred and violence were inevitable. Around them, Brightwater hummed with life, the sounds of children laughing, adults working together, a community building something new and precious. It was not perfect. There were still challenges ahead, still prejudice to overcome, still people on both sides who would never accept what they represented. But they had proven that it was possible. That humans and orcs could build a future together, could love each other, could create something more beautiful than anything either group could achieve alone. And sometimes, on quiet nights when Alara was asleep and they sat together watching the stars, Philip would think back to that morning when he had decided to take the mountain trail instead of the main road. Such a small choice, Such an ordinary moment, and yet it had changed everything. Because Grasha had been waiting on that trail. His soul bond, his wife, his partner in building a better world. She had known him by scent alone, had recognized something in him that he had not even known existed, and she had been brave enough to push him against a tree and say, "I knew it." Those 3 words had started everything, had led them through danger and prejudice, through love and loss, through the hard work of building something new. And now, years later, those same 3 words echoed in Philip's heart every time he looked at his wife, his daughter, his community. "I knew it. I knew you were meant for me. I knew we could build something beautiful. I knew that love was stronger than hatred, that hope was stronger than fear, that 2 people choosing each other could change the world." And they had. One day at a time, one choice at a time, they had changed everything. The story that began with a push against a tree ended with a settlement full of families, a region slowly learning peace, and a love that would endure for the rest of their days and beyond, carried forward by their children and their children's children. It was not the ending anyone would have predicted when an orc girl pushed a human surveyor against a tree on a mountain trail. It was better. It was real. It was theirs. And as Philip held Grasha close under the star-filled sky, feeling her heartbeat against his chest, and knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges and new joys, he whispered the words that had become their private mantra, the reminder of where it all began. "I knew it too. From that very first moment I knew." Grasha smiled against his shoulder. "We both knew. We just had to be brave enough to listen." They stood together in the gathering darkness, 2 souls who had found each other against all odds, who had built a love strong enough to change the world. Behind them, the lights of Brightwater glowed warm and welcoming, a testament to everything they had accomplished. Ahead of them stretched years of life together, of watching their daughter grow, of nurturing the community they had created, of continuing to build bridges between peoples who had been divided for far too long. It was everything Philip had never known he wanted. It was home. It was love. It was the future they had fought for and won together. And it all began the day an orc girl pushed him against a tree on the trail, sniffed his neck, and said the 3 words that changed both their lives forever. "I knew it."